markets doing?
Pretty good at the moment, Rob. We've had a relatively good season compared to last year. Levels have been consistently higher through the whole season. We're starting to see now where some sectors are starting to drop back to where they were last year, in particular the fine crossbred sector, which is mainly the Chinese market. Their activity since Christmas has just been a bit sluggish. They're starting to get back into it again now, but you've seen big pressure on their types leading up to Christmas, and then it has just sort of slowly slipped off. The coarse wool sector has been holding fairly well, and at the moment the crossbred wools, the coarse crossbred wools, your carpet types, are around about 14% higher than where they were this time last year. Lamb's wool also has done fairly well until just recently, as the wool gets coarser.
Mm-hmm.
Anything below 30 micron, finer than 30 micron, has had a bumper season for price. Once you get past 30 micron, it gets a little bit harder to trade. You need to get more length to it, so you've got to get a 2 to 4 block 3 inch or longer, and then those wools can move into the combing sector. And there's quite a lot of those around because there's been quite a bit of feed. So that sector has actually brought back the average price overall. And saying that, anything finer than 29 micron is still fetching very, very good prices.
So that length means that we're going back to once a year rather than 3 times in 2 years?
Not so much in lamb's wool, it's just the seasonal growth of lamb's wool. They start shearing, say, for around December, January, and then you only get 1 to 3, 2 to 3 inch wools, and they tend to be finer because they're younger wools. And then as the season goes on, the lambs get larger.
Yep.
The follicle opens up more, they're eating more, and they produce a coarser wool. So as the season goes on, their wool goes to, probably lamb's wool only doesn't go past about 3 to 4, 3 to 5 inches in a season. After that, they turn into what we call woolly hoggets and will grow out to 4 to 6 inch. But there's not much of that happening in the country now. Most people shear their lambs as lambs. And in fact, this year, because it was so hot in the lamb market, the lambs were shorn early, and then within the first 12 months, those lambs were shorn again. So you ended up getting second shear lambs as well. And their microns were also under a lot of pressure at that stage, because there was what they call the face-to-face business for the fashion of collars on winter jackets. And that was big in China this year. So farmers
There's a bit of fashion coming into it.
In the crossbred sector, which is unusual. You think of it in merino and mid-micron, but not so much in the coarser sector of wools. And of course, lamb's wool slips between two areas quite nicely. It can move into things like woolen blankets and things like this jacket and infill for the inside of jackets as well as into some of the fine apparels and fine sweaters.
It's a supply, because that's a major part of what you're doing, isn't it?
It is, and this year has been rather erratic. There's been the same amount of wool as we would have expected come on the market, which is just a little bit off last year's volumes, but the timing of it has been a little bit different to what we were expecting, and that has helped keep some of the pressure in the market, because as exporters we have to anticipate supply against the demand from our customers and sell on a forward basis. So we're selling out 2 to 3 months ahead on what will be coming onto the market in a month or two's time, and some of it hasn't come on when we expected it. So that creates a supply imbalance against what is sold, and that has kept the steam in underneath the market. Now, since Christmas through January, February, March, and even into April is our high flow period for wool, and that again is contributing to a certain degree why some of the prices have dropped off. The other factor that actually helped hold our prices is the weakness in the New Zealand dollar against the basket of currencies. So
you've been waiting for that, haven't you?
Yes, and from an exporter's point of view, a weak currency, New Zealand currency, is actually a good thing, because it helps us with our exports as well. So we're for the four main trading currencies in the wool sector, which is the US, the Australian dollar, the euro and sterling. That basket of currency is around about 10% less than where we were this time last year. So that's another factor that's helped our price levels this year.
Now, preparation, is there any loopholes there? Because some people sort of still treat it as a byproduct.
They do, and it's difficult for us to argue to farmers in coarse wools to really do their preparation strongly when they see prices all much the same for poor wools, poorly prepared wools, or good wools. But what we have to do as exporters is we have to take the different components and actually put some of them back together again to meet a market requirement for certain types. So if the offline wools aren't removed and left in with the good wools, farmer might get still quite a good relative price, but they minimise the options for us to be able to meet the market demand and produce consistent products. The biggest thing with preparation this year has been that the season has been fairly good for growing perspective, so you haven't had as many of the off-colour bellies and pieces discoloured from the main body wool. So there's been more of what would have generally gone into what we call the oddments has been able to be left onto the main fleece. So we generally think we're going to get around about 10% of what is shorn off an animal as an oddment factor, and we haven't been getting that this year because they just haven't been poor enough to be taken off the fleece.
That's good though, isn't it?
It's good from a farming perspective. From an export perspective of us having to make products, it has put pressure on those oddment types. So farmers are actually getting quite good prices for what would be termed offline wools or their oddment types. What you're seeing now though is a gap start to open up because the weather has changed in a lot of areas. We're now getting far more discoloration in main body lines, we're getting far more oddments, and you're starting to see that price gap open up quite a lot. So it is becoming more important now that the types are separated out. The other biggest factor we're seeing is a huge increase in vegetable matter content in wool. And in combing wools, which are 3 to 5 inch and longer, it goes on machinery where it gets combed a lot, and a lot of that seed can be removed. When it's shorter than 3 to 5, so 3 to 4, 2 to 4, 2 to 3 and shorter, it goes on what we call a woolen processing system, minimal combing. So we have minimal opportunity to remove that seed.
Right.
And seed in woolen types is a big no-no.
Malcolm, thank you very much indeed.